Hey everyone, Kelly Dean Allen here with you again. So then, the fantastic guitar solo that you just heard was originally put down by the legendary but still vastly underrated session guitarist Steve Hunter. Who is Steve Hunter, you may ask? Well, he and his much of the time partner in crime, Dick Wagner, were the go-to rock guitarists during much of the 70s that many producers and artists alike turned to when they needed two of the very best, be it in the studio or as live touring musicians. And where went one, usually went the other. Train Kept a Rollin' by Aerosmith. That is Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, not Joe Perry or Brad Whitford. Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel, also Steve Hunter. The iconic live intro solo to Lou Reed's Sweet Jane from his Rock and Roll Animal album. Also Steve Hunter, trading off licks with Dick Wagner, of course. Now, when Alice Cooper disbanded his original group in 1974 and decided to go solo, he needed a new dual guitar attack to fill out the lineup. And there was really only two choices that made any sense. Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, of course, as they had also worked with Alice previously on Billion Dollar Babies and the follow-up album Muscle of Love as session players. The solo to Generation Landslide that I covered here today from Billion Dollar Babies was put down by Steve because lead guitarist of the original Alice Cooper band, Glenn Buxton, was hospitalized and recovering from pancreatitis when the album was being recorded. That said, Steve and Dick would go on to become core members of Alice's new band going forward, sticking around through albums such as Welcome to My Nightmare, Alice Goes to Hell, and Lace and Whiskey, before Steve finally moved on in the late 70s, early 80s, when Alice Cooper kind of began spiraling out a little bit, his image and music just getting weirder and weirder, and his fame and popularity starting to fade. Dick Wagner himself stuck it out with Alice for a couple of more albums, but these albums didn't really do much to resurrect Alice's waning career. That said, that much needed resurrection would come a couple of years later, however, because if there's one artist who knows how to reinvent himself, it's Alice Cooper. He just needed to clean himself up a whole lot first. Now, Steve himself would go on for pretty much the rest of his career, continuing to do session work with numerous different producers and artists, including David Lee Roth, and to also produce a bit of solo material here and there that sadly and unfortunately didn't find much of an audience for Steve. Dick Wagner would pretty much follow the same session guitarist path as Steve after his stint with Alice finally came to an end in the early 80s. One thing that was almost a mainstay throughout all of this is that if producer Bob Ezrin was involved in your project, and he was involved in a lot of projects, you'd likely find either Steve or Dick involved in it as well, as he obviously adored the playing of these two guys and probably liked them a whole lot personally as well. Steve Hunter now is 76 and he's still around, but I think he's legally blind if I'm not mistaken. However, likely still playing, and to this day remains the only artist to catch one of my many guitar solo covers that I have here on my channel and pop in to leave a nice compliment on my playing when I covered his iconic intro solo to Sweet Jane a couple of years ago. Thank you again for that, Steve. Dick Wagner, sadly, is no longer with us as he died about 10 years ago at age 71 of respiratory failure. That said, as far as guitar greats of the 70s, these were certainly two of its unsung heroes that rarely get discussed these days, and I felt like giving these two legends some love here today, so here we are. And with that said, we'll close things out. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and do yourself a favor. Go listen to some of the incredible guitar work that Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner put down in their prime back in the 70s. I promise you, you will not regret it. You guys take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. Cheers.